I am Oliver, and some fun facts about me is I've been to 41 countries. I have spent 2 years at sea. I've done the military civil service in Denmark, and yeah, I'm a Dane.
Very cool. We were talking about this before we recorded. The longest I've been at sea is like 7, 8 days. So I definitely love the sea, but I feel like compared to you, I have a long, long way to go in terms of my stomach for the ocean. But those are some very interesting fun facts. In fact, some of those will be going into more depth on the episode as well, talking about your 3 gap years. Again, I'm throwing
Yeah,
basic hooks here, increasing the suspense, but we'll be getting much more in depth on the episode.
little teaser. Yeah,
For the listeners, that's Oliver Raigard. He is a senior at Aarhus University, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that perfectly, but
you're doing well.
AARHUS University in Aarhus, Denmark, where he is majoring in computer science. No shame if someone hasn't heard the name Aarhus before. I hadn't. Second biggest city in Denmark after Copenhagen. Today, we'll be hearing more from Oliver about the choices he's made, the lessons he's learned along the way, and just chatting about a lot of different topics like gap years and university and education in Denmark, because he's the first Dane I'm getting on the podcast. Hopefully, there'll be tons of small nuggets of like wisdom and insight on the episode, which are also applicable to any listeners currently in high school, about to enter this like next big phase of life called university. So university is a big, big word, and an interesting transition point in life from teenagers to adults. But sort of, I think if you make the most of it, it can be an absolutely beautiful and transformative experience, provided you go into it with like the right intentions or mindsets. So that's what the podcast is about. Welcome to Uni Unveiled. I'm your host, Arya the Road. I currently study at Minerva University. Welcome, Oliver. Glad to have you on the podcast.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Awesome. We'll get right into it. I mentioned that you're a senior, so it's your last about 8, 10 months of university before you graduate and then get into the big blue world and whatever's out there. Um,
Yeah.
any top intentions or goals for the last year of your university?
Well, I think dedicating myself to my studies for one more year. I think once you're in the middle of university and once you're in those middle semesters, you can kind of slag a little bit more because it seems like there's far to the end, but then once you realize that you're actually in the last season of your time at uni, you shape up, and I really want to spend the time like investing in my classes. Also, I've had some electives this year that I've chosen myself, which brings more passion into it as well. I really want to find a university or degree relevant job as well as student relevant job. Just because when you study computer science, um, a lot of experience outside of just the uni is very important when you want to get a job afterwards. Some say it's like equally as important as just doing the course itself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, if you want to do software development, computer science, anything related in that tech world, having some work experience as well is really important. So definitely be looking for some jobs coming up through the next, maybe even the next like month or few weeks. I'll start applying for jobs.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I'm sure for us, like internship applications is intense. I'm sure job applications is like even more intense, and there's a longer list there. So, sort of all the best in advance for that. And I kid you not, I have friends at Minerva who are proper hardcore computer science AI people, and they spend as little time in the classroom as possible. They have the bare minimum GPAs, like a 3.0. All of their time is just work and GitHub and programming, just building things, I think, is so important, especially in computer science. I hope it translates to other degrees because I'm a huge sort of advocate for like learning outside the classroom and building cool projects instead of just talking, talking, talking. Um, but especially in computer science, I think, as you rightly said, what you've built, your GitHub, your projects, your internships are so important because it's
Very.
you can go very theoretical and maybe that's one route, that's the academic route, but especially like software development and ML and AI, very practical. To be honest, what you're learning today might be outdated like 3 years from today. So what's important is that you actually
Yeah.
have skills. Um, what got you into computer science in the first place? Any specific pull factors that got you like super passionate about this field?
Well, it all originated with studying like in high school. In Denmark we have to pick some some subjects that we want to have on a higher level in high school. Our high school is a little bit like the American college as well. Like we finish up a little bit later than you would finish up high school, and you do have to like select a few subjects that you want to have on high level, and I picked math and physics and really enjoyed that. I've always loved puzzles. I've always loved trying to solve things. Always loved that there was a real and correct answer rather than things being up for discussion. Of course, in computer science, things are up for discussion when you want to find a solution. But still, once you run the code and the code works as you want it to, it's like that feeling as well of having solved the problem or having made something that is ultimately correct if it follows all of the parameters that you want. Also, I did have my hands a little bit on coding in high school, and so I already knew that I liked it. Um, and then I think just I was really looking into what sort of life I wanted on the other side. I was actually kind of torn between quite a few different subjects for university, and I ended up picking computer science just because I felt it gave me the most freedom on the other side. I really want to be able to both travel, and I want to be able to work abroad, work remote, work from home.
Hmm.
I want to be able to do full time, partial time, depending on where I am in my life. And I just felt like computer science, I could see that a lot of the jobs that you are getting offered on the other side just provides this as like as a part of the job. You can go in and discuss these things. Also because at the moment, computer scientists in Denmark are on high demand, and we're in a shortage of people taking the degree. So you can kind of like pick and choose a lot, and that gives you a lot of freedom to put up your own your own like workflow as well. And then I think also, and another thing was just um, I really wanted it to be I really wanted to work in a field where I could also do some sort of entrepreneurship, where I would be able to potentially make my own business or work just like work private, work up my own company at some point. And I just felt that it was really easy to see how to do that within computer science, like
Hmm.
compared to some of the other things that I was looking into. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I think we hit a bunch of bases there. We started with sort of passion, also talked about the job market, also talked about I love the
Yeah.
idea of sort of the kind of life I want to lead after college and the flexibility I want. I want to be able to work remote and then going back 2 steps and be like, okay, computer science gives me that kind of a lifestyle. I think not enough students actually do that in terms of like there are some careers where maybe it's you have to travel a lot. There's some careers where maybe you can't work remote. But if someone wants to do that, they don't take that into consideration when actually choosing the college major. That is actually one factor. I think that should be considered. So
Yeah.
glad we actually brought that up. Now that now that you've spent some time over the past 3 years getting to know the basics, dipping your feet in like different aspects of computer science, is there any
Yeah.
specific like niche that you're particularly interested in within this big bucket of computer science?
I think I think when applying for computer science, I thought it would be more business relevant. I looked into a lot of videos on YouTube on people taking a computer science degree, especially in the States. And a lot of the people that I watched gave me an impression that computer science was very uh, entrepreneurship orientated and business orientated and very practical, like in the sense that you would have a lot of hands-on, and we do have a lot of hands-on, but it's a lot of hands-on in theory. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle a bit with Aarhus University is that it is well known for being very theoretical and not putting a lot of emphasis on the practice or correlating what you learn into a practical way that makes sense for when you go into your work life afterwards. And I can also see that in my peers, the people I study with, a lot of them are very into the theory of computer science. And it's not that I don't like it. I do enjoy it, but I feel like it takes up too much time within the subject of computer science. But if you ask some of my classmates or the people I study with, my fellow students, they will say that they love that part. I think also Aarhus University is pushing a lot of people to actually, take a master, take a PhD afterwards, become a doctor within the fields that they started studying in when they started. So I can see why it makes sense. I think I just really wanted it to be more about the business aspect, or seeing one-to-one how what I learned in the classroom or what I learned during the lectures, how I can apply that in a practical way once I get my job. And some things I learned to correlate directly into a work life. Other things I have just decided, I guess that's good knowledge to have, but I don't know how to use it in a work setting. But yeah, overall, I feel like I am content with like the courses still. I can still use it for a lot of things. I also just like you learn how to navigate on your own while you're studying. You learn to focus on what makes more sense for you. And also all of a sudden grades doesn't matter as much anymore. You focus more on you navigate yourself, like with yourself, what you want to take in and what you want to make more room for and what you want to prioritize. And so I might prioritize a little bit differently in regards to some of my subjects than some of my fellow students.
Let's go down this tangent a bit further.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick your brain a bit more here. Let's say you, who is like, from what I understand, decently clear about at least for a few years after university, I want to work and I want to get into industry and I want to work. And then maybe after that, there's like higher education, master's, PhD. Someone like you is interested in just getting into work in industry versus somebody who's very clear that right after university, I want to get into like a master's or a PhD.
Yeah.
How is your path at university? This could be inside the classroom and outside the classroom. How is your path, or how are your priorities different from someone like them? Even if you both are doing computer science, like what's the distinction?
I think you can sense that some of my fellow students who do want to pursue the long career within university and who wants to take both a master's and a PhD, they really invest a lot of time into the theory, into reading a lot of a lot of the books, a lot of the like material that is being put out, rather than working with it with their own hands. So I can see a difference in like some people really want to learn and they really want to work with a marker on a whiteboard, where I prefer to work with the code. I prefer to have my hands on, and then learn by mistakes, learn by doing. And I think that's a big difference between the two. You can see some people prefer to learn, by the book, and some people prefer to learn by hand. And I realized I thought I was more book orientated once, like when I applied, but I've just realized I'm a lot more practical, and I really like to have my hands on the things that we work with. And we do have assignments. We have 2 to 3 assignments every week regarding some code. So I definitely get to have my hands on, and I think that's a really important part for me. And that is also where a lot of my time goes into. It's doing those assignments and doing them well so I can learn something. Um, for me, that's more important than reading a lot of the theory behind what we code. I do have, of course, because there's an exam as well, you need to understand some of it. And I do put some effort into it, but definitely not the same amount as some of my fellow classmates.
Yeah, I mean, I love the self-awareness, and I feel like if anybody is able to have this realization at university that either I love the theory and I want to do things by the book and I love just like pouring in the textbooks, or someone has the realization that I love building and coding and I don't like to do things as much by the book, that might actually be a good indication as to like whether your path after uni is more like work and industry
Yeah,
or like masters and PhD. That's a pretty good, because I know many people who are stuck in between, like they genuinely
yeah,
don't know what's next.
yeah.
That's a good like pro tip there. Um, Coming
Also,
back to, go ahead.
in prolonging, I feel like also maybe I would find like the need or the enjoyment in actually doing a master's later on. But I think for me, I really want to first be in the working field, and then based on what I learned there, I might do a follow-up master's. I do think that's unlikely, but I feel like that would also that's an openness I have. Like that's it has potential to go in that direction. But I think once you get hooked on the work life and you get a good stable job, it's hard to see yourself going back to the university life.
True, that's true. Um, the Just rewinding a bit to what you said in the previous answer about sort
Yeah.
of your education being slightly theoretical, not as practical. Is this a problem with Aarhus specifically, or do you see this more widely in just the education system in Denmark and across different good universities in Denmark?
I guess in a way it's first I want to say that it's a preference. So I wouldn't say that it's an issue. I like for me specifically or personally, I get bored if I don't use it for anything. If it's just information and I just have to store it in my head and I don't know how to apply it in real life scenarios, it's becomes uninteresting to me. Um, some people love the theories, love, expanding on the theories and understanding the ins and outs of some theory or theorem or some sentence in math that was discovered in the past. And so the way, and I would say it's Aarhus University specifically, that's very theoretical, and that is perfect for some people. I've just discovered that I prefer more of a hands-on approach, and I know other universities within Denmark have more of that sort of learning style. I would also recommend to people who do like if you're open to studying in different cities, maybe in the same country or within the same state or something like that. I really recommend that you look into what sort of learning style that university is famous for having and understanding what you yourself prefer the most. I think that's a really if you're going to spend those 3 years and you want to just get the most of it, finding something that suits your style is really, really helpful. Yeah, I can work with the theory. I think maybe I would have been doing a little bit better at another university in a more northern city we have in Denmark. They're very hands-on, really well known in Denmark for being hands-on. Aarhus is specifically known for being very theoretical. Some of the others are more of a mix, other universities.
We'll come to Aarhus and we'll talk a bit more about Aarhus specifically. But before that, I want to go one level higher and talk about just Denmark. And so, being sort of an EU citizen and an EU student, you also had the option to go to another country in the EU. You also sort of, and there would be challenges, of course, but you also had the option of, let's say, going to US, Canada, or just another part of the world to study. Any specific
Yeah.
reasons why you chose to actually stay back home and stay back in Denmark to study?
So in Denmark, there are some rules, some laws that we have within the EU, which is that if you are a EU citizen, you can apply to any university within the EU under the same circumstances as someone who's from that region or country as well. So I could go to Spain, apply for a university there, and I would have to like be in the same. I would have to be offered the same benefits and help, and um, it just the same. I would be offered all the same things as a Spanish student trying to apply for a university in Spain. And the same goes for people trying to study in Denmark. They would have the same benefits as Danes have applying to a Danish university. Um, I think that the benefit is that we have a very favorable university system within Denmark. I also kind of knew that I wanted to study in Denmark. We have something called SU, which is kind of a student university payout that you kind of get a salary actually for studying in Denmark, and therefore I just found it to be too good of an opportunity. Like if I went to some other place, I would probably have to pay in tuition. I would also probably have to have some sort of savings. I would most likely not get any money throughout those years studying, and I would just have to wait until I could get that job on the other side. Denmark put a lot of emphasis on students having the freedom to both have fun, but also focus on themselves. Also being able to critically consider whether or not you are in the right subject once you start, because you get paid for studying, which gives you a lot of freedom to leave a subject behind and go to another subject. And I wasn't super certain when I picked computer science. So for me, having that sort of freedom when picking computer science, to just try it out without having to pay in tuition and with actually also getting a salary on top, that was perfect, because then I could just change if it wasn't like something that was for me. And I think that's why a lot of Danes just decide to study within Denmark. It's not the same, like you can be an EU student and you can apply under the same conditions, but most courses are in Danish. So it doesn't really, it doesn't translate one-to-one in that sense. We only have a few courses that are in English from start to finish. So that's why that's why I chose to stay in Denmark, and that's why I rarely hear of Danes trying to get an education somewhere else, because it seems too favorable to not just study in Denmark.
Yeah, I'm an economics student, and that's like such a good incentive. Like I don't that is insane to me that you're actually getting paid to stay back in Denmark and actually study here. You're sort of earning, as you said, a salary for just like sort of studying at
Yeah,
a local university. That I'm sure that's a good pull factor.
yeah,
Mentioned that most of your courses are in Danish. Some few are in English. I'm guessing those few are also at like the top universities, let's say University of Copenhagen and Aarhus, and a few of the top names. If you were to speak specifically to the international students listening to the episode, do you
yeah.
think that there are any specific super convincing reasons for, like, let's say, an Indian to come to Denmark and pursue their undergrad there?
We have a few, like we do have like a few really popular educations in Aarhus that are international, where we see people coming from all over the world to take them. Also, because some of them are unique. We have some like cognitive science is one we have at Aarhus University, which is one of the better ones throughout all of Europe. So we have a big pool of people traveling to Denmark to take that education, more international students than Danes, because everything is in English. We also have some people from EU who try to, who will come to Denmark to study, especially Swedes and Norwegian people, because they speak the language almost as well as Danes, so they'll be able to sit through. Otherwise, there's lots of exchange opportunities, like for example, in computer science, actually most of my topics are in English. It's just maybe one elective or one subject each semester will be in Danish, and the rest will be in English. So it is doable. But I would definitely recommend taking those that are specifically for international students. You do have a benefit if you're a European citizen because you can apply for the university salary, the SU. You can't do that if you are from outside of EU. You will have to pay in tuition, and you will have to you will not get money on the side. I think you can apply for some, but it's definitely not the same amount that you'll get. Um, so the universities are good. The international communities in Denmark are also really great. You see them everywhere. Aarhus is a city that has many languages. You hear Portuguese, you hear a lot of Spanish, you hear a lot of German, big minorities, all university students. A lot of people come here to study. We also have the Erasmus. A lot of people probably know about that for almost all of the different subjects at Aarhus University. Um, but it kind of depends on the specific one that you would like to study. Um, I have even like in my classes now, I have people who came to Denmark to study them and decided to learn Danish so that they would be able to take them. Some people from South America, some people from China as well.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Definitely sounds like a solid pull factor, at least for the EU citizens, potentially also for people outside the EU coming from like even different countries,
yeah,
for a specific program or a specific university, and just making sure that everything is in English and that potentially finances are also working out well. Because
yeah.
and I have no doubt in my mind, I haven't done the research, but I'm sure it's cheaper than like a US education for sure. Um,
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's still benefits. There's still benefits even though you're from outside of the EU. But I guess there it depends more. I would say it depends more on whether or not this university is the right one for you. If you see that the structure of the education that you want to take is just perfect, and if you like the way we do life in Denmark, our university life is very different than I think many other countries, which I guess is a topic we could talk about as well. But we don't live on campuses. Everyone is just kind of being independent, living in their own apartments. Most people do that in already during their gap years, which is another common thing in Denmark. Um, I'm just popping a lot of of keywords here. I don't know if you want to ask something into it.
Yeah, you're making it a bit difficult for me, but we'll come to both of those. We'll come to gap years, we'll come to university life. Before
Yeah,
that, I want to spend 2 minutes on Erasmus. A German student I had in the podcast gave me a brief intro because that was my first time hearing of Erasmus. So he gave me a brief intro as to what it is. I went and Googled it later on. For anybody listening, it's the first time, let's say, that hearing Erasmus. Can you give us a 2 minute summary of just what we were talking about?
it's kind of a European agency. It also you can apply for it even if you're outside of Europe, but it's a European agency that really helps and makes it easy to transfer between different universities within the EU, and also outside of the EU, and they will help you plan and schedule and work through all the like financial aspects. They will tell you everything you need to know before you try and transfer to another university. They only do it for a semester. Like the concept is that you'll be studying maybe in your own country, and then you want to take one semester abroad. Erasmus is a agency that helps you do that. And tells you everything you need to know about the place that you're going, what you need to sort out. Also, they will group you together. So you find all the other international students who are doing this like abroad semester. So it becomes almost of like an Erasmus culture. You have like these big groups in every city in Europe that is like an Erasmus bubble of people who came together and who have met each other through Erasmus.
All right. I think that's a solid summary. Again, I'm pushing university life and gap years and a few other topics to a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to get through before that. I want to spend a few minutes on Aarhus University specifically. You
yeah.
already mentioned sort of it being a bit too theoretical for your taste specifically. So sort of despite that being one of, let's say, a slight con to your experience, let's talk about pros and pull factors. So despite knowing that, what specifically attracted you to still pursue your undergrad at Aarhus? Like what's special about the university?
Well, Aarhus University gives you a lot of freedom. It is, if you compare it to high school, if you compare it to college, it's just so much more flexible. I guess it is that in most countries, in most cities, but I guess I think Aarhus University just do it really well. All of the lectures are recorded, so you can reschedule your program. You can have a lot of people have hobbies or working life on the side. You can really work around almost anything because of the freedom that is implied by the university. Also, I feel like another advantage is they make you work together with people a lot. At least that's something for my course. I know it's a different thing if you study other things. But there's like this no one is left behind culture. You always have groups. You always have like people. You do assignments in groups. You have classes and a lot of like you'll have class groups. You'll have individual groups. You'll have reading groups where you can kind of keep each other accountable on having read the pages that are needed for the next lecture. Not that I necessarily read all of those, but you do have those groups where you can keep people accountable. It's all enforced by the university. Like it's or not enforced, but it's like heavily. The university really wants to help, and they try to make it as versatile and open for everyone. And they really want to catch people so they don't fall through or fall behind, which I think is really great. It's a lot about, I think also the Danish culture is a lot about solidarity and being there for each other and, standing shoulder to shoulder. Like a very socialistic culture where you don't leave anyone behind. We want everyone to have a success with the university life. So there's not a lot of independence. You can choose the independence if you want. You can of course push things away, and you can decide not to go into the groups. But it's easy to find people and accountability and groups within university.
From what you're describing, I think it sounds like a good learning environment. I think that's just how I like, at least I personally like a university to be, in that everyone is sort of, there is, so it's funny, in a sense, there is competition because you're competing for like maybe similar internship
Yeah.
labs or jobs in the future. But at the same time, you're also helping each other along the way. It's not like someone is holding back information from someone else. That becomes an actually toxic university culture. But from what you're describing, I think at least our host is doing a good job with staying away from the toxic culture, at least, which genuinely is the case at many pre-professional American universities. I won't like begin taking names, but I've had people on the podcast talk about that toxic culture at university a lot.
Yeah, where everyone is pushing for themselves and they want to strive, and helping a friend might put them in a slight disadvantage later on, which I feel like, yeah, you don't see any of that in Aarhus University. It's a more of a let's do it together. Everyone who's in the same semester, let's make it to the end together.
Beautiful. Let's spend a few moments just talking through your application. Maybe this is also useful to someone outside of Denmark who's potentially thinking of applying to Aarhus or to another Denmark university.
Yeah.
At a high level, if you had to just briefly skim through what were the different steps in your application process? Again, maybe a slight memory test here. I know this was a while back, but whatever.
In a very practical sense, you just everything in Denmark is regarding university is public. You do have some very specific niche universities or like private. They're not called universities, but you can have private schools, maybe for theater or acting. Some specific niches that are private, but for all universities, if you use the name university, it's public. And so everything you want to apply for, you do through a public web page, like the Danish government web page. It's a little bit different if you're from outside of Denmark. You need because you need some of our social security numbers and stuff to apply through that web page. But then you have another web page for international students. But it's very simple. You open up this web page and it can when you're logged in, it already knows that you finished high school. It knows what your average grade is. It knows what topics you took on higher level, so it knows what things you are applicable for and which things you are not applicable for. And so you just have a list first of the city, like the different universities. And so you pick a university that you want to find subjects from, and then you just so I could pick Aarhus University, computer science, and that would be like one column in a list of priorities. And then at the top, I have my first priority, and then I add all the other priorities. And then how it works is once it's around like summer start is in September, but then in around July they will lock the list, and you will not be able to change it. And then they will start from the top, see if you're applicable, see if the university wants you. If not, you just go for the second thing on your list, third thing, and it goes all the way down until something gets accepted. And then you'll get a mail once you've been accepted into something saying Aarhus University Business and Administration have given you a space. You only get offered one space. You don't get offered multiple ones. So you can, once you get that space, you either accept it or reject it. If you accept it, you're starting in September. If you reject it, you will have to wait another year for applying for something else.
From what you're saying, tell me if I'm getting this completely wrong. The evaluation of the university is completely based on your high school grades, and that is the primary reason why they will accept you or reject you, or are there like essays and a bunch of other components there?
So when you apply, you can apply in two ways. This is getting a little bit more detailed, but like, let's say I want to apply for some of the more difficult educations in Denmark would be medicine, law school, psychology. They have two options. Either you apply only based on your grades and what topics you had in high school, and it may like they decide every year. They decide on an average that they will say if you have this average or above, we will accept you in. Otherwise, you will not get a place. And for those I just mentioned, those four, for example, it's very high. So only the best students will get into that. You also have other topics that the average that you need is so low that it almost doesn't matter because they are very open for people. And like, for example, computer science, there's such a big need for computer science students. So even though it's a really difficult course, they allow anyone who wants to come in as long as they had the right topics in high school. So it's not about like the difficulty of the course that you're applying for. It's only about the popularity of the course that you're applying for. And it's a way to averaging out where you get people applying for. So the Danish system is a lot about like it's micromanaging or macromanaging a lot in terms of making sure that we get a broad like everyone, like we get a wide variety of different university students throughout the whole country.
That was technical, but I think now I understood sort of what's going on. So I'm hoping if someone, especially who's not Danish, was listening, I feel like this was a good breakdown. Now I have an idea of sort of how this works. Last question here before we dive into a very exciting topic of gap years. We're going to be spending some time there for sure. For all the listeners who are sort of hating me right now that I'm getting into these other aspects, we will talk about gap years. I want to talk about, I think this is an important question to be asked, especially since you're almost towards the fag end of university. You've still got a year to sort of, let's say, make any final changes or get any final thing you want out of uni. But if you were to look back at the last 3 years, anything you wish you had done differently or any sort of regrets you have?
I think I did mention how I was very. I mentioned why I picked computer science, how I was thinking about my future life, the work life that I wanted, and how that was kind of what pushed me to do computer science. I do feel like this is a personal thing for me, but I am very I really like to be in control. I really like to have everything planned out, sorted out before I don't like to go head first. I prefer to dip my toes, be on the safe side. And for that reason, I feel like I often try to calculate me studying computer science. So that's kind of funny, but calculate what is the right choice. And in that process, I can often forget to listen to intuition or listen to emotions. And I think something I should have done more is rather than sitting with myself and try to calculate what was the right decision, I should have spent more time with people who know me really well, and I should have talked about maybe more about what I felt or why on a maybe more on an intuitive or emotional level, like why I wanted to study computer science or why I did not want to study computer science, or even like if you know someone who's not who doesn't have an agenda into your life. Like if you talk with your mom and dad, they might have an agenda about like what you should study because they have ambitions for you, and that ambition can shine through them actually knowing who you are and what you like. But if you know someone, a friend, or if you know another family member who you know care a lot about you and who you are and want to see you not just like get a high salary, but also to thrive in the workplace that you're going to be in, ask them what they think about what you're going to study, or ask them what they would have guessed that you should study, or what how they see you and what they see you being best in or best at. Um, I realized long after went into computer science that my mom, for example, never thought I would study. Like that was not a thing she had ever thought I would study, and she sees me as a much more uh, kind of like a little bit more on the emotional side, soft side, human subjects. She thought I should study maybe psychology or even something creative like being an architect or something in that aspect. Where my dad was much more on the like he wanted me to go pursue high in terms of uh, both uh, demand on the job market, salary. He wanted me to get a stable job rather than risk something. And so, and these things were not apparent to me when I applied for computer science. They become apparent to me later on because I started talking with my parents about these things. And I think it's important to people listening maybe to do that before rather than later. Yeah. And also be aware that some people in your life in the best with the best possible like they want to see you thrive, but they might have an agenda. They might have a dream for you that they cannot see it from your perspective because they prefer to push you in a certain direction because they want the best from you. So find people that want to hear your side of the things and who know you emotionally and who doesn't have like an agenda into your life.
Mm. I think that, in fact, that was, you actually captured the point of me asking the question, which is even alumni. I asked them, like, what are regrets? What would you have done if you could go back in time and change something about your university? The reason I asked that is literally if I had one intention for the podcast, it's that the mistakes which I make, I don't want my younger brother to make, or my juniors in school to make, or someone who's currently in high school. I don't want them to be making a very dumb mistake I made at university. And so if I can be transparent about like this was something I did very stupidly at university, I don't want them to be doing that same mistake. Make new mistakes at least, even if you're going to make
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah.
I think that's the point of like us, like me, you, and all the other guests on the podcast being very
Yeah.
open and open is like, yes, we did mess up, we made mistakes. Just don't like sort of make those same dumb mistakes as us. Do something different, learn from like our mistakes. That's the point of
Yeah.
getting advice from like seniors or someone up. elder to you.
Yeah.
And I feel like having someone around your age, friends, maybe a college counselor, maybe a mentor who's not your parent, definitely current university students for sure. These are like, it's valuable to have a bunch of perspectives, like not way too many, but definitely more than just parents, I think is very valuable.
Agreed. Agreed.
I think number two is, and I very much relate to you in terms of I always want to be in control. I don't want to take uncalculated risks. I'm calculative in that sense. Maybe that's my
Yeah.
mixed major coming through. Um, but my genuine hope for myself, for yourself, and for anyone listening to the episode who likes to be very much in control is that I really hope university and the people you meet at university teach you the power of like spontaneity. And I've had some beautiful
Yeah.
experiences in my first year where my friends just dragged me out at like 10 p.m. and we came back at like 3 a.m. after doing some random just walking the streets with no plan. And it was very uncomfortable to me. I was like, what is going on? Why didn't we plan this at least? And they just like pulled me along. And so
Yeah.
I think university is absolutely the time to sort of go with the flow sometimes. If your friends are taking the lead, let them take the lead. You don't always have to be taking the lead in your friends group
Yeah.
and being very, very spontaneous. You're young, you're sort of agile, you're adaptable. If there's a trip that gets planned 24 hours prior and you're going the next day, that's okay. Like that's the fun of going on unplanned trips.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's a genuine hope I have for anyone at university that teaches you that life is about like being spontaneous and not over planning sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like you have something to add.
Yeah, actually, to both things. I think in the first one, I also you said how it's good to have other like maybe a university counselor or someone who like knows the educational system. I think I just wanted to say that I agree. I also think sometimes people like your parents, they might see that you are outperforming them in some of the subjects from high school that they remember they were maybe not as good at. Like, for example, my dad saw that I was really doing well with my grades in math. So in his head, I should do something with that math. Like it didn't matter too much what my like in what I intuitively thought about math. It was more about I was doing well in math, and therefore I should definitely use that when applying for university. Um, Rather than asking questions about whether or not I actually really want to like
Hmm.
work with that full time and have that be my like my life, my work life. I can say now that I think I will be very happy with it, but I feel like I did not consider that when applying because I was getting a lot of input from my dad. And he just knew I was good at it. And he still, like, to this day, he thinks it's the best thing for me because he knows I did well in math in high school. I must be really good at it. I made the right choice with my degree, where my mom, who was really good at math in school as well, back in her, she saw that there's more, she knows that there's more to it. And you can do really well in math, but not necessarily want to spend
Yeah.
your work life afterwards on that.
Huh.
Um, and I think that's important as well. Like you can be, because I think especially people who do well in a lot of different areas and who get high grades and everything, it can be really difficult to know what you actually like because it has been more about pursuing high grades rather than feeling what subjects you like more. And sometimes you might even think you like a subject because you get good grades and you like that feeling of reward. But maybe it's actually not how you as a person work more in like instinctively. Maybe you are more of a emotional or soft person, or maybe you don't process in a more calculative way, but more in a soft and round way. More like even though you did well in math, you might be actually better off studying something in uh, over in the human subjects.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was just some thoughts I had as well. Going off your second point, I think being spontaneous, you just find out life is so much easier to control once you're living in your parents' house because you don't have a lot of risk going on there. Everything is sorted out. You have a safety net all the time. You're gonna find out life is a lot more, yeah, spontaneous in and of itself.
Mm.
And I think a part of going into uni life is also a part of adulthood, and it's about learning that life is not something you can control. Life is actually very, very, um, yeah, it's kind of all over the place, and you will learn to be flexible as well in that.
Mm.
University life is a lot about being flexible and, yeah, getting outside of your comfort zone. Um, Learn to work and stay stable in a life that is all also chaotic. Yeah,
The last thing I'll say here before we actually jump into gap years is I think being slightly uncomfortable at university and at this age is actually a very, very good thing. And you should actually crave that slight discomfort because
yeah,
that will
embrace it, embrace it.
absolutely, I can embrace it, give it a nice warm hug because that is actually what will let you grow. And if I look back even at my high school days, a few things I did that challenged me or that made me uncomfortable in the moment or discomfort, that actually made me sort of a better person, a stronger person, helped me grow in certain ways. And that was the best preparation I could give myself for jumping into university. And at
Yeah,
whatever that makes you uncomfortable and whatever that's hard is a good
yeah,
preparation before you jump into sort of life after university and adulthood officially after graduation day. So embrace the discomfort. Don't run away from it. Is what I'll say, I guess.
agreed, agreed.
Let's talk about gap years. And I will actually start by sharing my personal experience, a few of my views, and then I'll let you actually get into it because I'm not the one who has taken any gap years. You're the one who has taken sort of the three gap years between ending high school and being a freshman to Aarhus. My personal journey with gap years, I was thinking of taking one. My parents, in that sense, are very, especially for a typical Indian parent, very radical, very unconventional. I think my dad is like more mind-wise younger than me and more unconventional than me. So he's very pro gap year. So he was very clear that after 12th, he wanted me to take a gap year and then sort of get into university. Multiple reasons that I can get into, which I get into as the conversation goes ahead. Um, but what I want to highlight is that especially in my culture. I don't know how it works for, let's say, the European cultures or any other person listening from other countries. In Indian culture, a gap year is absolutely like a very new concept, quite looked down upon. It's sort of like people genuinely ask me, like cousins and relatives and friends, like, are you failing the 12th grade? What's going on? Why a gap year? What the hell are you going to do in this 1 year? Why are you like wasting your time away when your friends are literally racing ahead of you and you're going to be their junior? Like, how embarrassing is that? So it's sort of a pretty negative stereotype. I'm really hoping to break that on the podcast. I think there is so much value to a gap year if it's provided it's planned well, provided it's intentional, provided it's not a year of like Netflix and just doing nothing. But if it's spent well, I think a lot can come out of it. My peers at Minerva who have taken gap years, I see a significant difference in them and me just because they've had a year to travel, explore, build cool projects. Because that's what makes you an interesting person at university then. That's what makes those conversations interesting with friends and professors and coffee chats and networking. Um, that's my story. Enough about me. You took three gap years. Let's give listeners like a high level overview of what were you doing in those 3 years?
So I started out like first right out of high school, applying for military service in Denmark. So I joined the army, and I was there for um, a solid 8 months. And then right after that, I worked. I got a job on a ferry. So Denmark is we have a little bit of mainland connected to the rest of Europe, but most of Denmark is spread out over 200 different islands. So we had a lot of transport going on at sea. And so I got a job on a ferry. There was a restaurant, worked there as a waiter. Um, did that for a couple of months, I think a total of 8 months as well. And also did a little bit of work in a daycare institution for children. And when I was done with that, I wanted to go travel. I had a lot of different plans, but it was COVID time, so um, kind of narrowed it. It made it kind of easier to like make a choice because a lot of things were just not possible. I had spent some time working on the ferry, so I found out I really liked the life at sea. So I wanted to look for an opportunity to go and sail Was considering whether or not it should be on a sailboat or maybe a bigger ship. But then some friends knew about a ship called Logos Hope, which is it's an NGO, a nonprofit organization that does humanitarian work around the globe. And they were still open for recruiting, even though COVID was wildly spread throughout the world. And I was like, that's my opportunity. And I went there. It took me 20 days to get there because of airports closing down and me being stuck on different Caribbean islands, but they were because they were located in the Caribbean. But I got there and I spent a total of 20 months just living on the living on that ship. And then I came home and started my first semester at uni. So that was the 3 years I spent, the three gap years.
Wow. In retrospect, do you think 3 years was like too long a time? Like, do you wish it was one gap year or two gap years? Or are you like perfectly happy? No, three was a good amount of years, and then I got into university.
I think 3 years was very like it was a good amount. I could maybe have done two. I could also see myself do four. Um, I think maybe I should have spent less time on the ship. If anything should have changed, I should have realized that because for me, and what you also mentioned, gap years are an investment into yourself. And if you're in a place where you get too comfortable or things become too kind of stale because you know your way around things and you don't really learn anything anymore,
Hmm.
I would say that's the time to move on to some new project. And yeah, you can feel that. And if you just get really comfortable and you're not pushed outside your comfort zone anymore, that's kind of when you should see that as a cue to either pursue something else in your gap years or maybe start thinking about what to study at uni. And I think I spent a little bit too much time on the ship, but I really love that environment. I really love the friends that I got there. It was really hard to let go because you live in a bubble. So I wasn't really pushed by society back home or by my parents because they were not really part of my life when I was sailing around the world for those 20 months. Um, so I got a little bit too comfortable maybe at the end.
Mhm.
Um, so that's why I mean I could have done maybe 2 years and just spend a little bit less time on the ship, or I could have spent that third year doing maybe something else. Yeah, having other opportunities. But I learned so much from those gap years. So I feel like it was a big investment, and overall I'm just very happy to have spent those 3 years.
And I genuinely feel that someone who has spent even one gap year well is a value addition to their university, to their peers, to their professors. Even if they just did completely non-academic stuff, like a lot of your gap year was not like internships or like studying from textbooks.
Yeah,
But just in terms of the person you become, the kind of life stories you have to share, that's what, let's say, many of us go to university for, especially when we go abroad, is sort of you want to meet people with different life stories and different journeys. And so you generally are doing both yourself a favor and the people you're interacting with a favor. As you said, I think a lot of growth. The number one thing in a gap year is like be slightly, as I said, as we've been talking about, be slightly uncomfortable, spontaneous.
yeah,
A lot of those themes are coming up. Um,
yeah,
what I actually want to do is make a list of sort of good reasons, like solid reasons to actually take a gap year. And so I'll start with a few of my personal reasons, and you can feel
yeah,
free to add to my list. So
yeah,
if I were to think about it, I have three big reasons. One, if you feel like you're not ready for university for whatever reason, you feel like you, let's say, want more time to adult, experience more of the world, be exposed. Even that's as simple as like you want to take 4 months and work very hard on your university applications. I think that's very valid. Spending 4 months for 4 years in a solid place seems like a decent calculation to me. Number two, I think someone who's just very adventurous. You want to travel, you want to get out there in the world. You don't want to be boxed in a classroom because you've been boxed in a classroom for 12 years of your life. That's number two. I think number three is actually, and maybe this is very unconventional, is someone who's still 50-50 about even going to university. I think a gap year is a good time for deciding whether university is even something you want to do. And so people enter a gap year maybe with a certain opinion of like university is important, 80% I will go, 20% I won't. And at the end of the year, it's like flipped because of whatever experiences, internship, they found a way to make money in the gap year and they just continue and sort of it becomes gap years, 5, 10, and you never get back to uni. So that's number three is for a very unconventional student like that. In your case as well, I know you ended up going to uni, but I feel like potentially you might even have had experiences in those 3 years that forced you to like never go to uni, just get into work as in computer science. Those are my three reasons overall. Do you feel like you have anything to add to the list?
I think maybe going off what you said as well, I have friends who actually did like they thought of it as gap years. They were intending on applying for uni, but got a business going and it went really well. And they found out that they enjoyed that so much more. And I think gap years are really an opportunity to, if you have like ideas or you want to try something out or you want to work in a certain field, maybe not as a, of course, you don't have the education to be a professional or something on a certain level, but you can work alongside or you can work in areas or sectors within society or with the, yeah, where you will get experience and you can see if it's something for you. So I think that is a big helper. I really think another thing also applying like what you said, if you're 50-50, even if you think you're certain, I thought I was very sure that I was going to be an engineer once I finished high school. I was going to apply for either structural engineering or computer engineering. I realized I met engineers. I talked with them. I found out that the work life they had on the other side, or maybe not even the work life, but like maybe also just the people. I didn't feel like I was associating as much with them. I met some other computer scientists along my journey or my 3 gap years where I just felt I understood their reasoning. I understood them as people in a way that I found really motivating. And so I actually changed like my whole view of what to apply for because of my gap years. So just want to, yeah, that's also something that can happen where you just realize maybe you thought you were going to study one thing. You thought you were going to study medicine, but throughout the years you found out you had a big sense of justice, and then you want to pursue law school instead because you never had life experience that kind of challenged you to really feel what you're passionate about, maybe because it's been so kind of classroom box. It's kind of simulated. It's not, you don't get as much real experience. You don't get to push yourself way out of your comfort zone and see how you work or how you think in those situations. Yeah. And I think in prolonging of that, because whenever you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, you also have personal growth. And I think that's another thing you can definitely see in Aarhus, especially in Aarhus. A lot of the educations, like, to even apply for them, some of them will say, like, I mentioned how you can apply in 2 different ways. One way is just by grade. The other way is by writing a personal reason for applying. And a lot of people will get denied there where it says you should have more life experience before we think you're ready to do this course. They will say you should invest more time working in this, like for psychology, if you want to apply without the grades, but through a application form. You need to have done things like worked in an NGO. You need to have worked in a daycare. You need some certain, like you need experience, real life experience that makes your application valid before they would even accept you. So I think that's like Danish society is built around like gap years. It's a lot of like coming of age. You can also sense it like in classrooms. Those who chose to go directly from high school and in, they don't click as well with the people who chose to do a lot of gap years because there's just like you don't have as much to talk about. Some people have a lot of like life experience and thoughts about life, have seen a lot of cultures, and it's hard to like create the conversation with people who have nothing to compare that with. So that's something you can see. You kind of group together. Those who choose to go directly will group together, and those who have a few more years of experience will group together. Also, of course, there's an age gap because of that. So there's multiple factors, but you can definitely see that people tend to find those who did the same, and there's a big majority in Denmark who do take a lot of gap years.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
What I actually love about my university, Minerva, and why I think in one specific aspect I'm having a better experience than, let's say, my friends going to more traditional universities, even if those
mhm.
are American universities, is that at Minerva, a lot of students come in not right after high school, but either they take gap years, or some of them work, or some of them are even like transfer students. Some of them have like were building companies, and then for some reason they wanted to get back to university. That is amazing because, to be very honest and like brutally honest, 12 years of just sitting in a classroom, homeschool, you actually haven't like seen much of the world. Like you haven't experienced much. If you can see more of the world before entering university, I think you actually will be able to get more out of your university experience versus for some people, the first time they see the world is maybe at university or maybe even after graduation. But if you can
Yeah,
actually speed up the process, make it earlier, that's what the gap year is for, basically. Interactions with those people are absolutely like insane. Like I have Israeli students who first did their military service of 2 years, then went and traveled like more of India than even I traveled as an Indian, went and did some backpacking, worked for a bit, saved up money, and then came to college. They have so much life to talk about, even beyond just like academics in the classroom. Like they're
yeah, yeah,
25, they're older than me for sure. Yeah, sometimes I'm jealous about like, oh, you're just 18, you're like so much ahead of us. But I'm like, that's okay. But like you guys have lived a lot of life. Even at 18, they lived a lot more of life than I had as like an 18-year-old. Um, for someone who's hearing about gap years for the first time, I think there's so many rabbit holes to dive into. I'll just provide some quick hooks before we move on. Is go online, go to ChatGPT, what are like Google, what are potential interesting ways to spend a gap year? There are so many creative ideas. There are specialized gap year programs, which actually will just take gap year students and do some traveling with them or teach them something. And to be honest, there's a whole world of opportunity. Anything which, let's say, you foresee yourself doing in a university summer could potentially be a gap year. That could be internships, travel, meeting cool people, 100 different things. But those are just
yes.
quick hooks. What I want to actually push you on, I have my own answers to this question, but we'll sort of start with yours. Again, back to the Indian mentality and the Indian culture, the typical Indian parent mindset is sort of you're losing valuable years of your life. And so let's say
Yeah.
versus someone like me, I just went from high school to university. And so, whereas let's say I graduated at 21, you might graduate at 24. And so then the question is sort of professionally, you're lagging behind, and I am ahead. What would be your response to someone who sort of says that to you? And how would you like defend your gap years in front of them?
I think it's a lot about the society that you come from. Danish society is not as career focused as it used to be. People focus a lot more on personal health, on work-life balance. People see it less and less as a career overall and more as a journey. And for 10 years, you might work here, and then you might find out you're much more suited in HR or communication or as a leader, and you will take on certain new responsibilities within a company. So that I think it's just seen as a much more organic process, and therefore there's not this sense of like race or I need to get ahead of my peers, or if I'm not fast, the jobs will be taken. Um, in Denmark, a lot of people really appreciate just age and experience. In a way where I even feel like I have a huge benefit when I come in, like when I finish my education, I have something that a lot of the people from my university class does not have. Like the things I've learned in traveling, my English is at another level because I've traveled so much. I um, have had a lot of like self growth and discipline for the military, like these things that are they are really valued by companies as well. And they in Denmark, you don't just look at what is your education; you look at what did you do before your education as well, and you do actually use those gap years to represent like to use like to get a job as well. You show those things as well to kind of indicate that you are qualified. Um, and yeah, and so I don't think because of Danish society that it's a race. I think in your culture, in Indian culture, maybe it's more frowned upon, and it's really hard to argue against it in a culture that's because your culture is built around certain viewpoints.
Mm.
So of course you're gonna go a little bit more out of your way if you take a gap year within a culture that's not in that mindset. You really gotta see the value to do something that goes against like what your parents may think is right or
Mm.
people and friends around you. Um, in Danish society, it's so encouraged, so it's kind of easy to just do, and it's really easy to see why that's the best option you could like choose. I can definitely see why if I had grown up somewhere else, I would have a much harder time arguing for why it should be a good thing. Even if I don't know, maybe Indian culture, maybe Indian companies don't care too much about gap years. Maybe they will look at it and think that's weird and say we would rather pick someone who did not have gap years because it seems like you're not as dedicated, or it seems like you're a little bit more lost in regards to like what you wanted to pursue, and we want someone who has more thrive. It depends on the culture. I can just say from a personal experience that it has helped me a lot and I've really grown. And I'm happy to be in a society that looks at gap years in the same way as I do, because it helps me and helps everyone to take them, and they will, yeah, enrich not just your life then, but also afterwards, even going into the job market.
Yeah, that was a sweet, balanced answer, not sort of frowning upon either culture. There are obviously reasons why each culture is as is. I see positive shifts in Indian culture. I see more openness. I see
Yeah.
some soft skills, which I absolutely love because soft skills. I love saying this one thing that soft skills are very difficult to come across on a resume, but the moment you talk to someone, they'll come through very quickly. And so that's why I mean, why is like the interview stage often the last stage before we actually select someone? Is like after every other barrier has been passed, I want to actually speak to this person face to face. Are they a good person? Do they have some basic soft skills? Can they talk basic things? That's important. But yeah, I genuinely hope parents listen to this specific section of the episode. And I genuinely wish that if a parent is listening and if your child actually wants to take a gap year, you at least do some further research and have an open discussion about it. That's, I think, the very least that is very important to do. Um, let's do a brief section on Danish university life. I know you mentioned how it's different from other countries and cultures. So let's say you're done with your classes, you're outside the classroom. What does your time outside the classroom look like in Danish culture at university?
So part of the gap years as well is people take the time to move out from their parents' house. We move out. A lot of Danes move out in the like late teens, 18, 19, 20, and they spend the gap years trying to make their first like financial choices, getting like a job, trying to work out, having to pay rent for your apartment, getting a routine with cleaning apartment, making food every day. Those gap years, a lot of people invest those into just sorting out your life and becoming ready to be living independently. Um, so that once you start university, you already have this thing kind of sorted out, and you have a way of life that you can continue after, or both while at uni and after uni as well. And you can definitely feel that as well when you talk with university students, especially international students. You can sense that because they will usually be living at dorms at the universities that they're from. Everyone is living at campus. It's very different here where everyone is living in the center of the city. If you walk around in Aarhus down in the center, uh, I think it's the ratio is 1 in 3 is a university student because it's such a popular university place. But people are just doing life, working at coffee shops, working in stores. People are navigating this like double life at having studies at uni and then working in the center. So it's a center run that is being like run by youth, by university people. Um, And then you have the campus, which is a little bit spread out, but it's also in the northwest side of Aarhus. So a lot of people live in the center and they actually take their bikes, they take their buses, and they go to campus and they will come back home. And everyone is living in apartments, in small houses, shared flats. Some people even live, in their own apartments. And it's a very, you can say, like, it's a quick and rapid ascending into adulthood or into adult life in Denmark. Parents are very proud when their children in an early age of life take on the responsibility of themselves and like move out. And I think that's why gap years are so encouraged as well, because it's like it's a little time pocket to get ready for uni, because you sort of stable yourself out and you find out how to live, how you should live without parental care and having this safety net you had when you lived at home.
Hmm. That's a good sneak peek. And I think there are aspects of that that other countries and cultures would actually benefit a lot from, which aren't like, let's say in India, I see aspects of that that I think we could do better. But I think I love the point of them making you an adult very, very quickly because of specific reasons. Sometimes for me as an Indian, it's a bit harsh that sort of you're just kicked out of the house and you're sort of living on your own at 18, 19. But in a way, it's like one of the best things a parent can actually do for their child is sort of that
Mhm.
and responsibility.
Yeah.
Let's begin wrapping up. I want to begin by just fast forwarding a few years in time. You're about to graduate in about 8, 10 months, 2 to 3 years down the line, professionally. What do you see yourself doing?
Um, I hope to maybe prolong the job that I am going to apply for here in the next few weeks. Get a full-time software development job. Um, I hope that that would then escalate into either, growing within that firm. I really want to be part of a newer firm, a newer company that is hopefully located in the center of Aarhus. I would rather be part of like in new branch of thinking and developing something new rather than being in a team that is maintaining, which is like if you become a software developer, you will either be primarily maintaining something that is already functional for a bigger company, or you will be part of the team developing all the new things, all the new tools for a new company. And I think the experience I can get working in a company that is making something new is something that could then lead me on to make my own company one time, where I know all of the essentials for making a company, both from a computer science perspective, but maybe even from a business perspective, from a law perspective. Because I was part of a team that was so small and where information is so shared, where I can use my skills to the fullest, because I feel like I am kind of broad, and I feel like I have traits that can be applied not just in computer science but in other aspects as well. And so I want to start a firm with diverse people like me and hopefully build something from there. I want to focus on AI. I think AI is not yet being used in smaller firms. You have a lot of opportunity there to go and apply that. So that's something I want to capitalize on in the future.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump into our fast fire round of questions. This is just a way to make the episode a little bit more exciting and fast paced.
Yeah.
Get towards the wrap up. Um,
Yeah.
you very quick questions and sort of the challenge for you as the guest, which I'm going to throw is be answering in one short phrase or one short sentence, as brief,
Yeah. Yeah.
but hopefully
Bring it.
brings out something fun. Uh, let's start with any one wise quote or wise saying that has actually stuck with you over the years or inspired and motivated you along the journey.
I have one that I have always, not always, but for the last few years, has really pushed me through a lot of things. It's by Franklin D. Roosevelt. He said, like, courage is not the absence of fear. but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. And I
Mm.
think talking about like pushing yourself outside the comfort zone, growing, self growth, uh, seeing life outside the classroom, all of those things can also be fitted really well into that quote. That we should like it's not about like it's not that you necessarily are courageous for not having fear. It is really scary to step outside your comfort zone, but you know that something in that is super healthy. It's more important than the fear itself. And so you choose to pursue it anyways. You choose to go for it. And for me, that is courage. And I want to be courageous in that way. And I hope to see other people around me do the same. And I want to push them in that direction as well.
Mm.
Um,
I'll actually just squeeze in one of my favorite quotes here. I think it's by Winston Churchill. He said, maybe I'm butchering it. He said, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that actually counts. Again, I think that applies so well to university. There are successes, there are failures, but what will get you to graduation day is actually the courage to continue that counts. So I will leave it at that. That's my wise quote for the day.
yeah.
My question two is so far over the 3 years at Aarhus, you seem like someone who's really passionate about CS and AI. And so I want to ask you, what's been the most fascinating or interesting class you've taken over the last 3 years at Aarhus?
Um, well, I think right now I'm taking machine learning, AI. I think it will be that course if you ask me in a few months.
Right.
But looking back, I would have to say programming languages. It was I'm going to get very technical with the terms, but it was very interesting to get we learned to code in a specific way, even in high school, with a specific viewpoint. And programming languages just kind of tore that down and kind of simplified everything down to both we learned a completely new way to write code and also just learned that writing code in general there's some fundamentals and it opened my mind for coding in a very theoretical clean mathematical way um, where I felt I really understood it as a language, like as a with semantics as we have when we speak English and Danish, and how every single programming languages can kind of be cooked down into the same like semantics, which was just very fascinating for me.
Hmm. Number three, and this is a follow-up to what you just said on the spot. I
Yeah.
for listeners to hear any one programming tip which you think applies well to even like just a beginner just starting out, or even someone who's slightly advanced. But from this class or from what you've learned through your coding journey, any one tip that you want to share, like an aha moment for you.
I think coding is a lot about having fun. Like it's a very project orientated thing. Like you set a goal and you work until you see that goal fulfilled, and you actually kind of leave things there and move on. I think if you want to get into programming, if there's a retro fun game that you played as a kid, you I can guarantee you it's not that hard to code, and you can actually sit down and do it for yourself, maybe in a week or maybe in 2 weeks, and you will have it. Like if you just spend a little bit of time every day, you will have it running, and that I think is everyone gets hooked on that. If you do that, you will be understanding. You will understand why computer science is fascinating. You will be
Mhm.
hooked on it. Um, and then I think the same thing applies for people who have been in computer science for long. If you're unsure if it's for you, I think it's probably because you don't feel like you have done a project and seen it succeed. Because I think computer science thrives in the way that you can get a lot of success. You can really feel the reward of finishing a project. So I think you just need to work more on projects. Just try and see something to the end.
Love it. Um, a lot of this episode, I've really enjoyed you being very reflective, introspective, I feel like maybe this is the gap years or the military or a mix of everything. But I think
Yeah.
you're able to have like a good look inward and sort of see what went well, what went wrong, how have you learned and grown along the way. This question is going to be interesting for you and for listeners. What's one way you've seen yourself learn and grow specifically over the last 3 years at Aarhus University?
I think I've just gotten really good at letting go. I think I kind of talk as if I own that like thing already. Like when you go into university, you're gonna learn to be flexible. I was not flexible once I started at uni, but I've just learned to kind of roll with it. Um, like sometimes you're way ahead, sometimes you're way behind. But it's literally gonna work out. If you just have like people who care about you and push you to come through, you're gonna end up like on the other side of your education. You're gonna find an interesting job. Um, I think, yeah, I just learned to be more in chaos, and I have learned to love the chaotic part of life, and I have learned to love not being in control, which goes against my like original way of thinking. Um, yeah, a diverse life, living a diverse life.
A less deep, probably a more fun, surface level question. Any
Yeah.
of your favorite campus traditions at Aarhus University, which is like very memorable?
we have this we have this thing where all of the students across Aarhus University will meet up in a park. Um, I mentioned how campus was kind of spread out throughout the northwest part of the city, but we do have like the old original part of Aarhus University where there is also a big park. And in that park, we're around 32,000 university students in Aarhus. All of them will come to this park, and we will all have brought like fold out chairs, and we'll sit across this whole park, and there will be this it's called a regatta, where every single faculty, every single subject that you can study will bring a team of five, and they will bring a boat, and then there's going to be this race where you kind of you find a winner, you find the best subject every year, and it's just it's like it's a challenge between like every single different course at uni, but it's also a thing that brings you together when you sit there and you can walk around and there's 32,000 students and you spend a good day together. Also, it becomes a festival near the end where they will have big Danish music artists coming and playing. I think it's a very I think no one has tried something like it until they come, because it's like it's people show up at 4 a.m. in the morning to get seats, and then you sit there throughout the whole morning and you just have banter and yeah, it's crazy to see a park with 32,000 people sitting in chairs.
That was vividly detailed. I could almost picture it in my head. So, stop with that. Lastly, it's been a great episode, a very different episode. We've touched upon different things than I do on most episodes, but sort of the moment we spoke and I went through your LinkedIn and I heard about some of your experiences, I was like, let's chuck everything else aside. I want to talk to this guy about gap years and Denmark and like military service and all of
Yeah.
so I think in terms of what I expected from the episode, we've accomplished that. So it was a non-traditional episode, but that's what I loved about it. If we had to wrap up this non-traditional fun episode with any final thoughts or final words for listeners, assuming someone is in high school, about to jump into university and then get into like the life at large, any final thoughts or pieces of advice you want to leave listeners with?
I think just create the conversation about university. Make it something that you're not scared to talk about, or that you think you can only talk about in certain groups. I think um, everyone around you knows some part of you, and let them talk about that into your life. Have open ears and listen to people. Make the decision yourself, but just be open and normalize having that conversation because it's going to lower the fear, it's going to lower the stress, it's going to just make it easier to go into.
Mm. And check out other episodes on the podcast.
Do that as well.
Brilliant. Oliver, if a listener enjoyed the episode, has follow-up questions, or they just want to connect and say hi and say, I think the gap years were cool, what do you think is a good way to reach you?
Um, you can reach me on Instagram if you want it to be fast. I think that's where you will catch me the quickest. I am oliver.rygaard. Yeah, Oliver dot Rygaard. Or you can reach me on mail. We'll also reply there. It's oliver.rygaard as well at gmail.com.
Awesome. Hoping people reach out. Oliver, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure hosting you on the podcast. Awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was very nice. Loved it.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.